Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke and today is what, the 10th of July. Wow. It's funny, I think Jenny and I had been on the phone yesterday and it was it's like what's going on with time? It just seems like it's just flying by. And oh, good morning, Alex. And Sam, good morning. I was just saying, it's just, I'm looking at the fact that it's the 10th of July and I'm like, how did it get to be the 10th of July already? And I'm just thinking about the fact that I still haven't paid my mortgage. I'm like, oh, we got to figure that out over the next couple of days. But anyway, good morning. I have some ideas. So we'll see. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about that. It is a rather, as you can see, I've got fans running in the background. I didn't want to put the air conditioner on because it'll be way too loud. But it is already hot here this morning at 6:30 a.m. I'm not, good morning. Good morning, Melissa. It's gonna be, it's gonna be another hot day. I was going to go outside and work, but everything is so wet out there that I just, and I've still got poison ivy on the back of my legs, so I was like, maybe it's a good day to just stay in and finish up some other projects, and I have some other things I have to get organized. Which brings me, weirdly, to the topic that came up for me today, because I woke up and I did some Rouhani last night and I did some this morning on myself because I wanted to, basically I wanted to get clarity on certain things and say, okay, because I know that there's certain situations where we have these kind of knee-jerk emotional reactions to things, and good morning. And so my feeling was like, okay, well, what I want is to know, I just want to think clearly and grounded and very centered, and also intuitively to know if there's something I should or should not be doing. A lot of times when we're faced with a challenge, we kind of immediately want to throw all of our resources, we throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, right? And so for me, I'm like, no, that's not the approach I want to take. I want to say, like, what is the most focused and efficient use of my energy? Where's the place where I want to guide my efforts to deal with solving whatever issues that I have to solve? And so I did some Rouhani last night, and I was glad because I slept really good after that. I was not sure. I was kind of hyped up when I was going to bed last night, and I'm like, okay. So now I was okay. I slept good. Point being, though, that I slept quite late this morning, and I was like, oops, I got to get up and do this live stream. So I did a quick connect to find out like what I should talk about today. And it seems like, I'm probably going to do some readings. I think this might be another session where we do some readings going through. But interestingly, I flipped, because everybody knows, well, anybody who knows who works with me regularly knows that I use a variety of cards, and among them I use cards that are connected to astrology and astrological things. And Virgo flipped up like 3 times. Okay, so I thought, okay, there's something about Virgo energy that we want to talk about. So what does that mean? What do we mean when we talk about Virgo and Virgo energy? Honestly, when I see Virgo come up in readings, even though, okay, I'm Taurus, Virgo is the sign I get along with the best. Okay, most of the people I've worked with have been Virgo. My sister, the sister who I get along with really well, is a Virgo. A lot of my best friends growing up were Virgo. Virgo happens to be kind of it's a very. Most of the Virgos that I know are people who I really, really like and admire. They're people who are they're sort of very centered and grounded. And even when they're out of sorts, they somehow manage to be out of sorts in a way that's very self-aware. So so they tend to say like, okay, I'm really stressed about this, but I'm also aware that I do this, I'm thinking about it this, and this way. So probably be helpful if I did it this way. That's always the thing. I remember growing up that my sister, like I said, it was a household, there were 5 children, okay, and I was the youngest. And my sister, who is, I guess, kind of the second oldest, she's the oldest one where we have the same parents. My father was married once before, so my oldest brother was older than her. He's passed away. But I always remember growing up that I had 2 sisters, and I had another brother. And of the 2 sisters, this one, my sister, who's a Virgo, is the one who she always seemed to get up. She always kind of had the same thing in the morning. She always kind of like had her breakfast, and then she got things ready, and then she went out. And it was just like, there was just something about the kind of routine that she kept every day, regardless of what was going on, that just felt really grounding and really comforting. So when I think of Virgo energy, I think a lot of grounding energy. I think of energy that keeps us just kind of on the earth, thinking practically, thinking one day at a time, and trying to get the details sorted out. Okay, because that's a lot of it too. When we are overwhelmed with a lot of different things, and I was just talking the other day about kind of going with the flow. So the question is, how do you marry an approach that says let's be methodical and take things apart and look at them one at a time, with an approach that says let's just flow along with whatever's going on. But weirdly, it's like you have to kind of make those two things happen at the same time. And it's not that, it's more of an art than a science, I think. But Virgo energy, I think overall, I think that what we're talking about here is not only the ability to be organized, because Virgo energy is an incredibly organized kind of an energy. It's very okay. I've worked in libraries for years. I have Mercury in the 10th house, so I was a librarian for many years, which should surprise no one. But everybody I worked with, like my bosses and stuff, a lot of them were Virgos. They weren't Taurus. They were other Tauruses. They were Virgo, and so we always tended to be on the same page. It was like, yep, you know, and we all and I don't know. It just there was just always this thing about. Sorry, I had a poor connection there. I hope that doesn't happen again. So we would just kind of methodically like work it out together. Always had like the same kind of thinking about it. So a lot of times this will come up when we need to be organized. Okay. It will, Virgo comes up when it's a situation where we need to focus on the details, because Virgo is very detail oriented. And you know, and that's the thing I think that we have the hardest time with, is trying to figure out, there's the creative idea. This is almost the more what they would, between left and right brain, they would call this more of the left brain thing, where one says, okay, to give the example Neshla Avi gave during the Rouhani class, she said, okay, let's just say you're somebody who wanted to open a crystal shop, right? And you've got all this ideas about what you want to do and what kind of classes you want to offer and this and that. She goes, okay, well then there's that other side of you that has to sit down and say, right, okay, well, you know, what are the costs here? How much does it cost? What is it going to take to get this? You know, what are all the steps I need to take? You know, what's my platform going to be? You know, what softwares am I going to use, or if I'm going to have the space, where am I going to have this space? How am I going to ensure this space? You know, all that stuff. That's the details, right? And typically, if you are a creative person, or if you are an intuitive person, or artistic, you know, I'll use any of those adjectives, right? Then you're somebody who probably doesn't really care much for that kind of stuff. Or if you happen to be an artistic person who's also Virgo, or having that kind of inclination, you may be very much a perfectionist about things, because that is another aspect of Virgo, is that it wants all the details to be exactly right. And so I have also worked with Virgos who could never get a project off the ground because nothing was ever quite exactly the way that they wanted it, which can also be that's the other end of the spectrum on that. You know, that's something that could be a hindrance, because the energy of every sign has energy. You know, again, there's no, this is a good sign, this is a bad sign. Like some people talk about Scorpio and they're like, oh, Scorpio's a terrible sign. Well, no, not necessarily. I know a lot of Scorpios who are really, you know, great outgoing people, great leaders, really, really well put together. And I know some Scorpios who are not, you know, so we kind of have this, every sign's on the spectrum. I'm Taurus, right? So Taurus tends to, I tend to have the same traits, you know, practical, methodical, plodding, persistent, but also stubborn as heck. And I'm on the Aries cusp, so just imagine what that looks like. And my mother's on the Aries cusp. We're only one day apart. So it's like, yeah, so there's these traits that they can, if they're used in a way that is helpful, then there's ways that they can be used that are, all of them have the potential to be helpful or not helpful. It's neither good nor bad. It's always like I always use the fire analogy, right? I mean, fire can cook your food or burn your house down, right? I mean, it can go either way. So it's not that anything is particularly good or bad. But the fact that Virgo comes up so much suggests to me that for a lot of us, what we're trying to accomplish right now, there's a certain amount of what they call getting into the weeds, of looking at the details of something, and trying to say, okay, let's look at all of the moving parts and make sure they're all working the way they're supposed to be, or is there something we need to switch out and do something else? Now, Virgo is associated with the 6th house of astrology, and the 6th house actually has a lot of different associations with it. It's associated with, okay, in addition to kind of that organizing perfection, it's a house of service, So Virgo tends to be associated with service that we do for others. That's why that house tends to be associated with your, I always say when I do my readings, the job rather than the career, right? Because we all may have jobs. If you're an artist, you might be a barista on the side, right? You do something else to kind of bring the money in. And so I always kind of think of that as the side job in a way for people. But I mean, sometimes your job and your career are the same, and ideally they would be. But whatever kind of work that you're doing, whatever kind of service, because it can also be volunteer work, it can be other things that we do for charity, things that we do to help other people are connected to Virgo. So Virgo is very much a sign of generosity and of service and of helping. Probably originally that had to do more with domestic labor. So the service, and literally in terms of the servants. But it's kind of morphed into this idea of just the general idea of serving others. And certainly if you practice in any kind of Hindu tradition, or if you're even a Buddhist tradition, there is this idea of seva, which is the idea of service. And seva can often be part of what they call sadhana, or spiritual discipline. So for example, my guru frequently, when we go to a program, there's opportunities to do seva. There's opportunities to work selflessly. Now, there's always an argument about whether or not people really work selflessly. There's actually entire books written about that, about the impulse to help others, and how that impulse may or may not always be coming from a selfless place. But then it's like, well, what does selfless even mean? The idea that there's no self-interest. I mean, if you have a kid who's volunteering so he could put it on his resume and make it look better for a job, well, that's not entirely selfless. There's an agenda there, right? Or we may be moved to help certain causes because there's something that we believe in, right? Oh, good morning, Sudha. So we have things that we may believe in, but so again, you ask your question, okay, is that an entirely selfless thing? My thinking on that is just, does it really matter? The bottom line is, if you're doing the work, then I don't know. I don't know. I think we tend to put this veneer of saintliness onto everything. Back to the perfectionist kind of idea. You put this veneer of saintliness that says that everything has to come from a place that is not invested in no self-interest. And I mean, I don't know that that's 100% possible. I just don't know. I mean, there's going to be, to a certain degree, we may do things. If you're in an emergency, like I think about what happened around 9/11, and the fact that you would have people who just sprung into action just to help people, or to help people in life or death situations because it felt like the right thing to do. You just feel like, I need to jump in and I need to do something. We have cases like that, where we have that impulse towards, doing something that puts our self-interest and our self-preservation aside. So we do have cases like that. That said, that's not an impulse that always comes in, and I don't know that it's always an appropriate impulse. I don't know if we had the impulse of always sacrificing ourselves. That just from a purely evolutionary survival standpoint, I mean that doesn't that could be problematic. But I don't know. I just think it's realistic to say that there's some cases where we will be spurred to act truly selflessly, in the sense that we're not considering life or limb for ourselves. But I also, especially with women, I'm always feeling like we have to be careful that impulse about service does not it doesn't dominate. I think there's a cultural expectation, particularly for women, that that's something that you're going to do. That teachers are a perfect example of this. Okay, when we see teachers' budgets in schools being slashed like crazy, when you see kids who have to go out and raise money so their teachers can buy school supplies, and salaries are being cut and everything else. And frequently, I've read a lot of articles on this, frequently what will come out of that is the idea that, well, yes, but you're doing this for the kids, so this should not be about the money for you. And it's like, well, yeah, but I have to make a living and keep a roof over my head, so it is kind of about the money. And a lot of people, even if they really like kids, everybody I know who works with children on a regular basis, it's not that they don't like children. They do. but it's not like they're always filled with joy about dealing with somebody else's kids. Especially, it's just at the end of the day you're exhausted because you're trying to keep everything together, and there's certain rules, and there's a certain modicum of behavior that you have to stay within when you're dealing with kids. You can't lose your temper with kids. You can't, but at the same time you have to maintain proper rules and proper boundaries, and it's not necessarily an easy thing to do if you are in the business of dealing with children in particular. But there's frequently the idea, it's interesting because if we look economically at our society, the professions that do the most service are the ones that make the least. Even if you're somebody who's like a social worker, or you work for a nonprofit or something like that. As a former Montessori educator, yes, it's an act of balance. Yes, it is. And and I have a friend actually who also did Montessori for a period of time as well. And you have to... obviously, you're there to fulfill a role. You're there to educate. That's your job. But at the same time, there's a broader component to it. It's not just strictly about, okay, I'm just doing this one thing and then I go home. Like, there's a bigger piece of it because you're also dealing with developing personalities. You're dealing with what the social rules are and what the social values are, and so on and so forth. I'm somebody who doesn't have kids. Okay, I'm in my 50s now, and I don't have kids, and I'm not going to. And that's not at this point. It's just not possible, which is actually okay by me. I'm not looking to raise a child at this age of my life. People always would say to me, they were like, "Oh well, one day you're going to really, really want a child," and I'm like, I just never have. And it's weird. Sometimes people get very judgmental about that too. I think, was it the New York Times that had done some kind of a poll of people, and it was interesting because at one point they said women who didn't want children, like some people rated them like worse than serial killers. I thought was like really incredible. And kind of going back to this idea of service and the idea that you should be, that somehow you just by virtue of being female, again, get back into that archetype of the mother, the archetype that has to do with the, because Virgo too, you think about Virgo as the virgin. Virgo is a very female oriented, and of course when we think of virgin, even though this was not the original sense of it, remember the original sense of the word virgin too didn't have to do with the woman who was not having sex. She was just simply a woman who wasn't married. Okay, so like in Greek mythology, Aphrodite was considered to be a virgin. Hard to believe, right? But it's because it's a different sense of the word. The word virgin in other cultures would have to do with virgin in other cultures has to do. We always think of it in a sexual sense, like in the idea that one has not, has not yet engaged in that, partaken of those fruits, shall we say? So there's different senses of it, but then we still have this icon too of the Virgin Mary, the idea of the female who submits herself to God and who is sort of this all-encompassing archetype of the kind and gentle and loving mother, which is one aspect of the feminine archetype. There are other aspects too, as anybody who follows me regularly knows. But there tends to be a preference for one over the other, and there tends to be a thing that a woman, because really, when we talk about, I'm not going to say the opposite of that archetype, but the other extension of that archetype that people frequently don't look at in this culture is the idea that there's also a sense of sovereignty that goes along with that. That the woman who is sovereign, who is free and independent, which again, if you have a model of submission, then then it's if you have this model of submission, then it becomes. Then obviously that sovereignty for whatever reason is a threat. And that's the whole subject of Catonia podcast, so I'm not going to get into all that here. But the idea that you are, I'm reminded of the myth of, and I know, again, if you follow Catonia, you've heard this one before, but of the Loathly Lady. And it's an Arthurian legend about King Arthur. He goes into this forest and he's hunting in this forest, and he's accosted by this giant, who says he's like not in territory he's allowed to be in, and the giant threatens to like cut his head off. And Arthur, of course, kind of manages to kind of talk his way out of it. And the knight says, okay, the giant says, okay, you know what? Let's do this. I'm going to come back and meet me. I'm not going to kill you now, but come back in a year from today. And if you can answer me the question of what it is that women want, what women really want, then I will spare your life. I won't kill you. And so Arthur's like, great, thanks. I'll do that. And of course, so he immediately now he has to go off and try to find the answer to this question. And I think I'm trying to always get Galahad and Gawain. I want to say it was Galahad. It was one of the two. Anyway, they always get the two of them confused. But one of them who's a really handsome young knight. So they're all out and they're asking all these women about what they want and so on and so forth. But then Arthur is approached by this really this old lady who just looks she looks like the proverbial. She's loathly. She's not attractive. She's a very kind of unattractive partially toothless drooling hag who comes to him and she says, I know the answer to your question. She says, but in order for me to tell you, she wants to marry, and again, I can't remember if it's Galahad or I want to say it was Galahad actually. But anyway, I'm going to be married to him. That's what I want. I want him as my husband, and then I will give you the answer to spare your life. And by the way, it turns out she's the sister of the giant. But so Arthur's like, okay, great. So of course, then he has to go back and tell the other knight, by the way, I have somebody who has the answer, but this is what the terms are. But of course, being dutiful, he says, yes, of course, well, you're my king, and you've told me to, this is what I have to do. So he marries this woman, and of course, people are horrified to see him married to this woman, who is, who's not aesthetically pleasing. And so he takes her to the bedchamber, and he's thinking to himself, oh dear, but he's like, well, it's my duty. So when he leans over to kiss her, she turns into this incredibly gorgeous woman. Really gorgeous. And he's, of course, surprised. And she says, okay. She says, well, now I'm going to tell you. She says that she talks about it as a curse that's been put on her. And she says, the fact that you looked beyond my appearance, so it's like now he's able to see her in her real form. But she says, now you have a choice. She says, I can be beautiful here in the bedroom with you and ugly in public, or I can be ugly in the bedroom and beautiful in public. What do you think? And he says, and he thinks about it and he goes, it's your choice. He says, you are the one who has to live with this. It's your choice. And I think as Martin Shaw used to put it, sovereignty granted, sovereignty returned, and because she is granted sovereignty, now she's beautiful all the time. Okay, so what does that mean? It basically means that's the thing that women want. They want a choice. They want to be able to choose their own path in their own life. They don't want some husband or anybody making that choice, father, husband, anybody making that choice for them. And that woman is beautiful all the time when she's allowed to make her own choice. And I think that's kind of an interesting way to think about that. But the idea of, okay, so we have the idea of the sovereign woman. So if we're going back to our idea of service, service can imply a lot of other things too, which are not as savory too. Sometimes there's servitude that is not, that is compulsory, let's just say, rather than voluntary. And the idea is that there's definitely ideas of sovereignty that are built into this, and ideas of being good enough. And again, when we talk about selfless service, that service that comes from the heart, I would say that more has to do with service that we do, not because it's compulsory and we must do it out of duty, but rather that we're doing it because it's what we want to do. You're doing it from a place of, this is what I'm choosing to do. This is where my heart goes. And that kind of goes back to what we've been saying all week about sovereignty, about when people are trying to make a choice between, well, do I just get some job I hate because it makes money, or do I do what I love? So it's interesting that, kind of coming around to this idea of service and sovereignty, those two things. Service does not mean that you just automatically have to give everything of yourself and not get anything in return. Even in energy work, we talk about the energy exchange. that's why a lot of times they say, you know, that energy work, well, at least what I was taught was like, you don't do energy work for free because you want to have an exchange of energy. Even if you decide that you don't want to charge somebody money, there's going to be something. Like somebody could say, oh, well, I'll paint that wall in your house if we do this in exchange. You know, I don't know, something. I think that was the example that Jack had given. But it was just, you can barter with people for that. But there needs to be an energy exchange for what you're doing. It's funny it comes up in a way, because I remember Neshla, who teaches the Rouhani class, she did some Rouhani for me in our session because we were all kind of paired up, and my friend who I did Rouhani on, well, actually it was Jenny, I did Rouhani on her when she had to leave, and of course she's not trained in Rouhani, so when it came time for the people who did, you know, they did it on one person, and then it was like, okay, now we're going to flip around and do it. Neshla said, well, I'll do you. So she did my Rouhani, and she said to me, culturally, we don't accept iron or cotton without paying a nominal amount because of the energy exchange. That's really interesting. Because of the energy exchange, yeah, that is. Oh, iron and cotton in particular. That's really interesting. Yeah, well, I imagine those are things that culturally can be a very, very high value, especially if you know what to do with them and how to work with them. They can provide iron. When we think about it, iron provides a lot of different stuff, and so does, you know. And cotton is something you can make into clothes. You can make into other things. It's that's interesting. Yeah, I actually did not know that. That's really interesting. So I didn't know that. So where was I? It was trying to go back to where I was, which is fine. Like I said, I'm just kind of going all over the place this morning. But what was I doing? It was oh yeah, I was talking about Rouhani. I was talking about Neshla, and that's what she said to me when she did my Rouhani session. She said, yes, thank you. Neshla had said to me, she said, you know, she says, your energy is very well in balance. She says, you know, clearly you've been doing your energy work. You're very much in good balance. She says, but she says, make sure you don't overgive. She says, make sure you don't overgive to people. That there's a balance in terms of what you're offering people. That there's a balance between what you offer people for free and what you're offering in terms of, you know, making money. There needs to be a balance between those two. And that's that's maybe, yeah, that comes around to that interesting thing. And so, yeah, so there's that balance between service but then also kind of this organizing and attending to details. But that's kind of a tendency that we have, and especially if you're in a profession that is connected to, and it doesn't have to be just the one that I'm in, but it does, you know, if you're involved with healing or coaching or anything where you would like to help other people get on track, sometimes there is a tendency to want to do more, you know. So there has to be a thing of, well, just kind of making sure that the energy exchange is even for everybody involved. So, so interesting thoughts today. I don't know, but Virgo came into my head, so I feel like there may be things around looking at areas where we're overgiving. Well, any of us watching or whatever. When I ask for those things, they're not usually for me just for me personally. They might also apply to me personally. And then just the idea that you are, you want to make sure that maybe it goes back also to the whole notion of quality of life or work-life balance, as we like to call it. We don't. There's a lot of things, certainly from my mother's culture, there's this tendency that if you are not working hard all the time, that somehow you're a sinful person or a bad person, and it's like, no, you need to put work in its proper perspective, okay? And there are times when taking care of yourself, healing yourself really, or just taking time out, doesn't even have to be healing, taking time out for yourself is in fact the right thing to do. Because, you know, even if you feel like there's a situation where you say, oh, well, no, you know, again, where you might be facing a challenge and think, I have to rush in and do all this right now. We don't necessarily do our best thinking in those situations either, because, you know, you tend to kind of react from maybe from a place of anxiety rather than from a place of seeing a situation for what it actually is. So I'd say that Virgo is coming up because it's kind of like, okay, attend to details, be grounded, and also understand what your service is to others. Okay, I think that's sort of I could sum that theme up. So let's look at our reading for today. Yeah, we got the Nine of Wands, the exhaustion card. That's the first card that we have. And it's funny because I think Patricia Weston, who I also follow, she does readings and such in Ireland, and I think she also got the Nine of Wands this morning as her first card. And yeah, the Nine of Wands has a couple of different. They're calling this the card of exhaustion here. You see this guy who's just surrounded by, it looks like, all this artillery, and actually kind of in this machine almost. He's kind of like the center of this machine. And so there's an implication of defensiveness here. Now, interestingly, the Rider-Waite Nine of Wands shows a guy, he's standing among all these wands, and he's got his wand, and he just kind of, he's got like a bandage around his head, and he's just kind of looking. And the idea is that he is what they call the wounded warrior. You know, he's got this vigilance. There's a vigilance that comes along where we're always like this. We're always on edge, you know, like waiting for the bogeyman to jump out of the next corner, right? Where, you know, I don't know, things have been going along too smoothly. I'm waiting for the next thing to come in, and I'm ready. My defenses are ready. But as we've pointed out in the past, that sometimes the better thing to do is just to let go and say, you know, whatever, because that's the point at which actually you do your, like that was the fencing example given by Alan Watts. Like, you know, the master comes in and beats the person randomly, and then when the person's always looking around ready to fight, but as soon as the person gives up doing that, and just says, okay, if he's going to come out and jump at me, whatever, that's the point at which he's ready to learn how to fight, because that's the point at which you're in that relaxed position where you're not tense and on edge all the time. You know, you're able to figure things out. But exhaustion comes, the fact that this is the exhaustion card, it's just we are coming into a space where, yeah, maybe we're tired of something. Maybe we've been doing something over and over again, and we're like, you know, I really just want to be done with this. Nines are kind of like, we're getting to the end of this. We're expending a lot of energy on this. It's like we're running the marathon, and like we're looking forward to the end. You know, we're looking forward to stopping whatever this is. Or if it's a challenge that repeatedly comes up, like, okay, I'm just looking forward to having this solved, you know? I'm just looking forward to doing that. But the inner feeling of which we're unaware is that the mind is too involved. Oh, we've seen this guy how many times, right? The mind is involved. And this is where we can overthink. And that's actually one of the pitfalls, potentially, of Virgo, is that in the attempt to be detail-oriented, we can start imagining all kinds of scenarios that maybe will never happen. That there's a sense that one needs to get grounded in what the actual situation is. That's my OCD card. Yeah, and you know what? That's you're not alone. I mean, I think a lot of people. I don't know too many who don't. I have met people. If I remember correctly, we've been getting 8 cards in our daily readings. Yes, we've gotten a lot of 8s. That's a good point. And now we're moving to the 9s. Okay. So, you know, progress, I guess, which checks out with the 9 today. Yeah. And actually there's another 9, this one, the 9 of Pentacles, external feeling of which we're aware, ripeness in this one. This is the 9 of Pentacles. Now, traditional 9 of Pentacles. Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah. And it's, yeah. So 9 of Pentacles, you're moving from the 8s to the 9s. 9 of Pentacles usually is about financial independence. And we're just talking about sovereignty, right? Financial independence is usually what the 9s have to do with. In this one, it has to do with ripeness. Something is ready for the picking. You know, there's ample abundance available. You know, it's just a matter of, you know, the time is now. Externally, we know that the time is right for something. Internally, our mind is still getting involved and making trouble maybe where there doesn't need to be. Okay? And so, to the point about the 8s and the 9s, promotion card, which one? Do you mean the 9? This one is the promotion card. The one I'm thinking of, the promotion card I usually see is in the cartouche, and that's usually the crook and flail card. Like, that's the one that usually comes up that indicates like a raise up in status. But certainly this can indicate that this can indicate it is the time is right for you to do something that you've wanted to do. So it could be in that sense. The idea that, because certainly it's a very good financial omen too. It's the idea of rainbows are akin to pentacles, and of course pentacles have a lot to do with financial abundance. So externally, yeah, there seems to be these opportunities that are here, but maybe we're overthinking the matter, and maybe we're not. We're overthinking, and we're tired. So it's just kind of like, okay, now we just need to. And also thinking about that too, Nine of Pentacles is also Earth energy, and Virgo is Earth. Okay, so Virgo may be coming up because it may be just like, okay, it's almost like you know what to do. Now you just need to ground it into reality. Okay, now you just need to come up with a plan of action, but not one where the mind is too involved. You want to, speaking of, you want to have all parts of yourself equally involved in this decision. And then here's our breakthrough card. Okay, this is actually the Justice card in this deck, believe it or not, but it's breakthrough because it's a matter of coming to a truth. Okay, it has this energy of, okay, reaching that moment of breakthrough where basically you stop doing this. Okay, you stop doing this and you move towards possibilities. Okay, now we're back to the Two of Wands. So in other words, okay, twos I only see as being kind of a place of decision, a place where we are ready to move. Okay, we've got this Nine of Pentacles, so we're ready to move, right? But that two with possibilities, that says to me that we are getting to a point where, like, again, if I look at the Rider-Waite, it's the person standing there with the two wands. It looks like he has everything, but he's looking out over the water. It's almost like that's a state of preparation for moving on to the next stage. And so, yeah, we're ready, and now we can look at possibilities rather than at limitations. Okay, and that's what it's saying. There's going to be a breakthrough in terms of what the possibilities are. And in addition to this, I think I wanted to pull, I had my astrology cards out today, so I wanted to, see what comes up in these today for our thing. Let's see, two came out. Okay, interesting. We have the solar eclipse card, and we have the first house, the body card. Okay, now that's interesting because this is almost first house. Okay, that's our identity, right? That's our ego identity. That's how we present ourselves. Now it's talking about the body. So this can be, this can be about the way in which we worry about diet, exercise, physical appearance, stuff like that. I mean, that all can be part of the image that we project to people, but also, our personal branding if we're in the business, right? Or just the what we like to be identified with to other people. The first house is the persona. It's what we project to people. And we have it with the solar eclipse. So the solar eclipse is a card of, we say it's revolution. Now it's worth noting, and I've said this before, that we had the solar eclipse, it was in early April, we had the solar eclipse. And eclipse energy, I mean, there's an eclipse season every year. It's usually like October, November-ish, and then we're looking at kind of March, April-ish. It can vary a little bit, but usually it's on that axis, on that nodal axis. And the effects of an eclipse can last up to 6 months. So if we had an eclipse in April, we could see the effects of that solar eclipse through October. And it's interesting too, because when I think of back to Virgo, I keep thinking that's sort of like late August to late September. That's kind of like moving into the autumn phase of things. And I don't know why I feel like for a lot of people, autumn is going to be a very significant time. So, anyway, it's, so we've got this energy of revolution. So when I see these two together, to me, this is a complete revolution of identity. Okay. This is like, okay, it's time to, it's almost like you're becoming, at least in the sense of what you identify with externally, you're becoming a different person. Okay, in a certain way. There's certain things that have changes. There's certain things that have like shaken things up. We had the breakthrough card. It's like this is a revolution in how you live your life and how you present yourself. All right, and so so many people have had changes. Some of these changes have been worrying or challenging to people. Others may just be that you get back to breakthrough, the idea that there are truths that are coming out, that maybe there's something that's coming out, some kind of a truth that you're seeing. So, so there's something here. There's definitely this idea of that maybe almost that it's time for an internal revolution of sorts, and that we are, and that's kind of what we're being called to. We're not being called to do things the same way that we did them before. And again, there's what's going on in our lives individually with regard to the stuff that we're doing and the stuff that we're managing. But the way we've always done things, the way that we think, we have to organize ourselves in a different way. We have to look at the moving parts in a different way. And because I think what it's saying is fundamentally feeling the internal revolution. Yeah, there's this sense that we have to look at the ways in which we're not the same people that we were a few months ago. And when I say that, I realize there's always an element of us that's fundamentally the same, right? That's who we are. But certain aspects of us and who we are may be going away. We may have made the decision to let go of certain things. Maybe we haven't totally let go of them. Maybe we've identified ourselves with, say, one profession or another, and then it's like, okay, now it's time to do something different. It's not, I feel like it's not necessarily the time to go back and just do the old thing because it's the comfortable thing, or it's the thing we know. It's like, no, I think it's time to move ahead and to whatever the new thing is that you're moving into, to kind of move into it passionately, moving into it with that sense of service that is about the service you actually want to do out of sovereignty, not the service that you want to do out of, well, this is the thing I ought to do. It's what I really choose. That may also be why service is coming up today, why Virgo is coming up today, because it's like, what is real service to you? And if you're going to spend your time, okay, we've talked a lot about working in community, right? Not just focused on the individual, but focused on the group. So what does real service look like? Real service happens from a place of freedom. Okay, you have to be free, and you need to be doing the thing that you really want to do in the space that you're in. And you're doing it because you want to, not because, I think, and again, I'm not saying anybody here thinks this way, but there could be people like, oh, this will make me look like a good person, or it'll make me look like this. I mean, people, to me, that's almost the, it's kind of like when somebody's in sales and they're just nice to you because they want you to get you to buy your product. The minute you don't want to buy their product, they don't want to talk to you anymore. It's kind of like, it's not so much about relationship or working with people from the perspective of just having some kind of an agenda. It says this resonates so much. Well, good. I'm glad it does today, because that's what came up for me. And so it's not so much about, we talk about networking. Okay, you go to conferences and stuff. I'm going to meet people so I can network. I can network for a job. I can network for this. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing that. I mean, it's the game, right? That's how the game is played. But at the same time, the question I think now for a lot of people, particularly a lot of people who are more on a spiritual path, is that we are moving into a space where it's like, well, what does real service look like for you? What does it mean to really, if we're going to talk about moving into identifying with the thing that really matters the most to our soul, that really gets to it, then I think that's when we're talking about that authenticity. We're talking about that authenticity that comes from the freedom to choose what kind of service we want to do. So, I think that sums it up. I could probably talk myself around that endlessly, but anyway, it's almost 1:15, so I just want to say thank you guys all so much for joining me. I like having, it's really awesome to have a big group, and we're moving from those 8s to those 9s, as Alex pointed out, and we'll see. Hopefully this means we're all potent and helpful. Thank you. Okay, thank you. You're welcome, and thank you. Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you guys so much for joining me as always. Love it when you guys can all join me in the morning, and I'll be here again tomorrow morning. Hopefully, still gonna probably be hot and humid, but anyway, I'll be here tomorrow morning. Everybody have a great Wednesday, and I will see you soon. Take care. You're welcome.